Welcome to Your Life Unchained. I am Rick Sheninger, your host, and it is my pleasure to introduce our guest today, Mitch Hartwell, but he was professionally known as Erik Everhard. Erik, welcome.
Hey, man, glad to be here.
Super happy to have you here. So today we're going to talk about confidence and all the things that kind of stem from that, regaining, gaining, having confidence. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And Erik, I think you have a story to share that is a good starting point for this topic.
Well, yeah. So, in my line of work, confidence is key, right? Because if you don't have your confidence, then, literally and figuratively, you're not going to rise to the occasion. So, when I first started, it was my very, very, very first day on the job. There was a company in Vancouver, and I'd been very persistent, right? And I think that's always key with business too. You can't give up when someone says, "Well, you don't get the job," or they say no. You got to have some persistence. So, this company they had hung up on me the first times I had contacted them, and then later on, I got persistent. I said, okay, I'm going to keep calling, keep calling, keep calling, keep calling. And, one day I get the owner on the phone, and he says, well, tell you what, come down to our office. We will take some Polaroids of you, and, we'll see if you've got the, quote unquote, equipment to do the job. And then maybe one day we could get you a job. But hey, they didn't hang up on me, right? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, this is great. This is awesome. And so I go down to East Vancouver where they had this studio. I use air quotes for that. It was basically this warehouse that was in the seediest area of Vancouver at the time, right? Like, there was the the drug addicts down the block, and you had one like hooker stroll down the block. It was that kind of area. And so I go up these stairs to their studio, and there's a big metal door, and I knock on the door, and the owner comes and he opens up, and I say, hey, and he looks at me, he goes, are you Mitch? I'm like, yeah. And then he just looks me in the eyes. He's like, hey, can you have sex with a girl right now for us? And I'm like, ah, it's like that long pause, right? I was just like, oh my God. And I think I just let out this tiny little squeak of a like, yep, and that was my first day on the job, right? Like, and it just, it really was one of those things where we talk about, you know, what is luck? It's opportunity meets preparedness, right? So I was given the opportunity and I was prepared, but it wasn't necessarily prepared in the ways that you would think. And I really reflected on this because, with the clients and people that I work with, I've had to sit and really analyze, okay, well, what made me so good at what I did, right? Like, what were the core beliefs, the core mental structures, the core identity shifts that occurred? And so one of those, and this is kind of what I was alluding to with the confidence, when I first had that very first day, and they said, hey, we want you to go do a scene right now. First of all, I had no time to think about it. Second, I didn't even have the belief structure that you couldn't rise to the occasion. Like, I had never, it's like my whole life, everything worked, right? So, like, because it wasn't even a thought. It was never a thought in my mind that I couldn't do the job. So I get out there, and of course, like, well, it's not a problem, right? So it was really like the very first thing was, okay, well, where's your brain at? Like, where's your mind at? Are you having those negative, debilitating thoughts, or are you actually proactively just present in the moment and just doing the process, right? Whatever process that is, right? And so for me, that part was super, super easy. I was like, okay, like here's the first sort of core tenet of what confidence is. And then for me, confidence then morphed into, well, now I need beliefs and I need skill sets, right? Because it's the same thing like anything where you have to develop competency, right? Like, at some point, you need to fundamentally know that you have the skills for every situation that is around you. Like, I've often likened it, because I'll have some people that say, well, couldn't you just have sex with one person? And if you had sex with them 10,000 times, wouldn't that give you professional experience? And I would argue with them. I say, well, no. I go, if you drive a Vespa 10,000 hours, can you drive a boat? Can you fly a plane? No. So just the fact that you spend 10,000 hours on a Vespa doesn't really equate to anything else out there, right? So you have to really start to look at it from that situation. That's where the skill sets part comes in, because you have to have enough skills in enough different areas that then you feel fundamentally that you have the confidence for whatever is going to come at you. So, and I think it very much applies in business a lot of ways. Like whenever you're coming across a new situation, you're going to be nervous. You might be unconfident. You may have to ask for help. You may have to ask other people how they have managed it. So, yeah. So that's that was my first foray into it, Rick.
So it's interesting because we've all used the analogy that we felt naked and vulnerable in a situation, but obviously in that particular situation that was very real. So how did you switch? I know you said you didn't have in your mindset, you didn't have any alternative other than success, but how did you switch from that meek little yes answer to, all right, let's do this? Like, how did you mentally make that switch?
Well, so that was basically a core confidence that I had ever since I was a kid, right? And so I'm going to put it in this terms, like growing up, for example, I always slept naked. Like that was just always something. My mom never bothered putting me and my brother in pajamas, right? So that just carried on as we got older and older. And so for me, I never fundamentally had any shame in my belief system about being naked. So for me, it was really like, well, I'm not going to just take my clothes off because I'm like, well, you guys might freak out. But internally, what's my state? Oh, I don't care. Right. So then suddenly I'm put in a situation where fundamentally they're saying, hey, if you take your clothes off, we will actually pay you. I said, okay, well, this is going to work for us then, right? Because that's in my wheelhouse. So for me, there was already a built-in sort of, I don't know that I would call it confidence, but there was a built-in comfortability, right? Because it was just something that I knew well, and there was no predetermined sort of shame about how I'm supposed to feel about it. It was just like, oh, hey, okay, we're just gonna hang out here, right? And I think the more comfortable you can be in those situations, the better off you're going to be, right? Because as long as you're comfortable, then you're not going to have crazy anxiety, right? As long as you can be comfortable, you can be relaxed, and you can be focused on whatever it is that you actually need to do, because the more that you can focus your brain, the less your thoughts are going to start having a negative loop to them.
That makes sense. So you had this one day, and obviously you passed their test. So was that it? All success, all positive from there?
No, God, no. It wasn't all roses and bunnies after that. but no, what it was the understanding of the level of what I was performing at. And I was lucky enough that the editor who used to edit all the movies, he pulled me aside one day and he said to me, he goes, hey, the owner's never going to tell you this, but you're really good at this. He goes, you should think about going down to Los Angeles. You can make some serious money. I'm 21 years old at the time, right? So I'm like, what? There's money in this, right? I had no idea, right? I was so green, Rick. And it was funny because at the time, I used to work at this super hardcore gym in Vancouver. And I mean, this was the kind of gym that no girls trained at, right? Like it had basically every avatar of meathead you could possibly imagine. So it was filled with bodybuilders, powerlifters, bikers, drug dealers, police, and bouncers. That was pretty much our clientele, right? And I used to work the counter. I would make food for all the members. I'd make them chicken and rice. I would sell them the memberships. I'd sell them the clothes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the guys there, his name was Jeff, and he was about 5'4" and probably 4 inches wide. And he was the resident drug dealer of the gym. Everybody knew him, right? It was like unspoken. It's like Jeff, and he would come in and he'd, sit at this table all by himself. He would order his chicken and rice, and you'd see him having meetings with members, right? In air quotes. And so when he found out that I had done my first scene, he was just like, "Oh man, we need to look into this," right? And so he actually helped me out to get started, because from that perspective, he was the first true businessman I'd ever met. Because I didn't come from a business family. I didn't know anybody that owned a business. And here this guy was, he was his own business. He was self-employed. I remember he had the Rolex, he had the black Corvette, all the things. And but he was extremely smart. And yeah, he's like, okay, he basically fundamentally laid out the steps for me. Here's how we're going to find out the information. Here's how we are going to get in touch with the companies. Here's how we're going to XYZ. And then he started execution. And so that was definitely the first, sort of quote unquote business mentor that I had, for sure.
So from there, and that was still in Vancouver, right?
Yeah, that was in Vancouver. And so with his help, uh, we eventually, so what I did, right, to get my name out there, and this is back in the VHS era, of course, right? I had about 40 promo tapes made, right? So we strung together clips of different scenes that I had done and some information, put some music to it. I had the editor do it all, and we mailed those all out. Like I found a copy of a adult video warehouse directory. So we had numbers and addresses of all the companies, and we just did a mass mailing. And so we were mailing these tapes and the letters and everything. And out of all that effort, we had 3 people contact us back, and one of them was a upstart. Now he's famous, but at the time he was an upstart director in Philadelphia. And he flew me out to Philadelphia. I did my first scene in America there. That went successful. And then the next month was going to be the Las Vegas convention. So again, we were like, okay, we're going to the convention, and we came armed with like all these VHS tapes, right? So armed with VHS tapes.
Was this, when you say we, this is you and Jeff?
Yeah, this was me and Jeff.
So because your first agent.
Sort of, you could say that. From that perspective, I mean, he really helped me out, because I'd never even been to the United States before. This was the first time I was even leaving my country of Canada. Right? I was so green on all this. Like I'd never traveled, I'd never been anywhere, right? And I mean, he knew the States well, so we went down there, handed out all those videotapes, and then got some contacts. And then it was basically like, okay, like you have to go down, if you want to actually do this, you got to go to LA. So me and Jeff, we drove down from Vancouver. I remember distinctly because he used to run drugs across the border. So he told me, he goes, hey, you can only take a tiny little gym bag. That's all you can bring. He goes, because we're going to be telling them when we cross the border, he goes, we're telling them we're going for 3 days, and we're just never going to stop driving. So he goes, it has to look like we're going for 3 days. So literally I showed up to the States with nothing. I had a gym bag. That was everything I owned in the world, and my car. And we drove from Vancouver. We made it all the way down to LA. And I remember, when we were there, he was like, here's $300, right? He goes, this is it. So because the next day he caught a plane and he went back.
Oh,
He did the drive down with me, and then he left me there.
oh,
And I remember,
wow.
I remember the second that door to the hotel closed and he left for the airport, like everything was fun and games. That was the moment, Rick, that it hit me. And I said, oh my God, I have to make it now. Like I am totally hooped, right? Like if this doesn't plan out, because and there was a huge lesson there that I've really taken to every aspect of my life that I think is extremely valuable. And I don't understand why more people don't do it. Everybody wants plan B. Everybody wants plan B. Man, unless your ass is up against the wall, like it has to be death, jail, or success, in my opinion.
Hmm.
If it's not death, jail, or success, there's no success, right?
Right.
So I had $300 in Los Angeles, of all places, and I had this. He had gotten me this tiny. It was this shack of a one-room studio. We found it through the LA Weekly, and it was in the ghetto of North Hollywood. Um, I was at the laundromat. I was the only person who spoke English, and I don't have any Spanish skills here. So, um, so it was. I mean, I was out of my element, and but yeah, I had to make it. So I knew. Okay, I've got to contact everybody. I have to hustle. I have to grind, and that was what I did. And I managed to working really hard. I managed to get 4 jobs that first month.
Oh, wow.
Now, that's not enough to pay, you know,
Anything,
rent or anything,
especially in LA, it's not enough to pay anything.
but it was the start. And that was the thing. Like, it's basically how you show up, right? Like, the business is the same. Like, what is the value that you are delivering for somebody? Because I went from 4 jobs, the next month I had 15. Like, it
Oh,
went that fast.
wow.
Oh yeah, because especially at that time in that business, if you were if you could hit the 5 markers, what I call them, right? Because if you wanted to be a super famous person in my business, you had to hit the 5 markers, meaning you had to be able to obtain an erection anywhere, you had to be able to ejaculate at any time, what they told you to, and not before. You had to be bigger than average. You had to be decently good looking, and you had to be able to create something or extract something out of the woman within the scene that would not have occurred if you specifically were not with them. If you could hit those 5 markers, people talk fast. It's like in any business, right? Like if you can go out there and hit a grand slam, metaphorically speaking, in business, people are like, holy shit, right? Like they're like, wow, this guy knows his stuff, whatever it is, right?
Right, right.
So that was my experience. And then, from there, then it snowballed to quickly within about, I'd say, a year and a half. Because immediately my very first scene in Los Angeles was for one of the biggest companies in the industry at the time. And the thing about them was they treated their guys like royalty, because they only hired the top guys, because what they asked you to do was really difficult stuff,
Uh,
as far as athletics, right? And we're talking about a time before there was, like Viagra didn't exist. Like you could either do it or you couldn't. Like it was so binary, and you could see that it was so binary. So it's like you had a small group of us that were like the kings that could do it, no problem. And then everybody else was just failing left and right. And, they were what we called 50-50 guys.
ah,
Right. So I worked for them for about a year, and then they hired me to direct movies for them. And that's where heading down the directing and producing path started for me. So then, then things really started to open up, because, now I was traveling everywhere with them. And then later when I opened up my own production company, then obviously I was traveling whenever I wanted. And then there was obviously a lot more money involved too.
right. So how did that mindset shift from, the talent to behind the scenes?
Well, there's a big difference between the two, and you you really need to have sat in both places to understand what's going on, right? And
Right.
and all the people that I've known that have worn both hats, they're the best people in the business. It's just like any business. Like if you've worked the lowest part in your company and you've been the CEO, you understand both roles and you can see it through both eyes, right? So, as the actor, where it goes wrong most of the time is that producers have no idea what it takes to do that. So they think you're either a robot, or they'll put you in positions where you could do nothing but fail.
Okay.
I mean, and not necessarily fail, but I mean some ridiculous stuff. Like I was I was I was on a podcast and somebody asked me about the most difficult place or worst place I ever had sex, and I said it was on an engine block in the middle of a floor, and they threw a tarp over it. I don't know if you've looked at an engine block, Rick, but there's a lot of metal parts there that
There
kind
aren't
of stick
very
into your
many
body.
flat surfaces on an engine.
No, not really. No. So, I mean, so they would set you up for failure under the guise of they are making, their art. They're making this, but there's a middle ground in there that you start to see when you wear both hats. So for me, one of the mental shifts was, okay, what do they need? What does my actor need, right? Because I'm the producer. So it's like, I want to get the best out of them. How can I put them in the position where they are going to shine? Because if they shine, I make more money. My movies sell. So why, you really have to step back, and I would find some of the best. Well, here was another thing that was very important. The best performers would always put the people they were paying in a position to shine. Lesser performers, if they ever got into a director's chair, would put you in a position to fail
Interesting.
because it's the ego. Like whenever I've worked for a guy, in the past where they were like the number one or number two actor, they always put you in a position to shine because they have no ego. They've been the top. It's the guy that's been number 20. Now he's in a position where he is your boss. He wants to, prove a point, or he wants to prove something, but the ego plays into it. It's you see it all the time. Like the person who usually actually is the champion is just chill because there's no ego left, right? You've done it. There's nothing. Who are you trying to prove stuff to? Right. It's just like the guy that's he's a billionaire. Like, what does he got left to prove? Really?
Well, and I guess it could go either way. I feel like, when they're on top, it's kind of like the old high school football hero that, they're out of high school and they haven't reached that same level in anything else that they've done. So the glory days keep kind of, they keep trying to relive the glory days.
Yeah, I mean, if you're both acting, that could happen. But if you're producing it, that never shows up.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, when you step behind the camera, now your focus is just on, you want to create the best thing, and you understand what they need. Like, you understand what they need more than anybody else.
Right.
And if it's somebody that has only ever produced a movie and they've never worked the side of the camera as an actor, they fundamentally have no idea. They just have this picture in their head, and that's all they want. And they don't care that in trying to get that picture, they may actually ruin everything.
Right.
They could piss the actor off. They could piss the actress off. They could, it could be a nightmare. And I've watched it unfold in real time. And because I've worn all the hats, I can be like, oh, this is going to be so bad. This is not going to be good. Right. But yeah.
If you boil this down into, the top 3 things that really helped you play through all of this, from that first day of, hey, can you come down here and quote unquote interview in the quote unquote studio, to 20 years later, looking back at this journey that you took, what would you say would be the top 3 traits that got you there? Let's see if they match.
Yeah. Well, I mean, number one, never give up. Like, you're only losing when you stop playing the game. Like, you fundamentally cannot give up ever. I think that's number one. Number two, you need to have irrational self-belief in yourself. Like, you really do. I mean, the craziest / stupidest thing I ever did, this was in 2005, I think. I was producing my own movie, and I shot a sex scene at high noon in the town square of Budapest with the tourists watching and the police watching across the street. Now, I don't think people should try this for a living, because I did get arrested and I had to bribe my way out of prison. But fundamentally, I had the most irrational belief that I could make it happen. And I did. So, so that would be number two.
Did you get to keep the footage?
I did.
That's pretty awesome.
I can private message you that one sometime. You'll get a laugh out of that, trust me. And be like, what the fuck was he what was he doing? So that's two of them. And then the last piece that I think, is very key, is that you need to have that irrational self-belief, but you need to stay humble. Because what I learned, and I've seen it so many times, the loudest guy in the room was always the failure. I never saw somebody that truly had that core confidence that talked about it. Not in a braggart kind of way. Like, they're always extremely humble. And I remember that there was one moment in my career where this was just hysterical. We were there. I was tagging along with another production company, and they had this older guy, and he was just talking the whole time. It's like, oh man, wait until I get to do this. I'm so big, I'm so good, I'm this, and he's just, and this, like, it's going on for like an hour before the scene. Like, oh, just wait, man, I'm gonna kill it. I'm gonna this. I'm gonna. Okay, action. Never got hard once. Kept talking the whole time though. Oh, just you wait until I get this together, man. You guys are gonna see. We're like, oh man, it was brutal. And that was a big learning lesson for me, right? Because every superstar that I'd ever seen, like all the top guys that I looked up to when I got into the business, it was all the same thing. Like, they just showed up and they just did the job. They didn't talk about the job. And there's a big fundamental difference, because you can talk a good game or you can be a good game. Right.
So, yep, I had perseverance, which was never stop trying, right?
Never stop.
Confidence.
Yeah, I think that's irrational self-belief.
Yep, irrational self-belief. I like that. I like the way you put that. And I had determination, which I guess ties more into perseverance. So humility was that third one. So
yeah,
I really like that.
Yeah, 100%. Those traits I've seen time and time again show up, and I think they are super, super important, especially if you want to get ahead. Because if you lack the humility piece, you can never gain alliances. If you just alienate everybody, like, how's that going to work out fundamentally long term, right?
Right. Yeah, nobody wants to be around the person that thinks they know everything.
Well, yeah, you need to be a student. You need to be a student of everything, right? Like, I mean, that's why I love hanging around all you people, because I have my wheelhouse of knowledge, but then somebody spouts off, I'm just like, my mind is just like, whew. I'm like,
exactly.
My mind is blown right now. Where did you come up with all this automation, Rick?
That's what's cool about being in these groups, where we each have our own set of wheel, our own lane. We each have our own lane, and it just, collectively we can add more to the conversation than any one of us could individually.
Yeah, and I think with successful individuals, success principles are fundamentally all the same, but they show up in different ways.
It's true. Right? Yeah, that's a good point. Well, Mitch, Erik, I really appreciate you being here today. And
this was awesome. Thank you, Rick.
Where can they get a hold of your book, or how can they get a hold of you? Or
yeah, so they can go to my website, which is www.erikeverhard.com, and the Erik is spelled with a K. Or they can find me on Instagram, which is at erikeverhardofficial.com. And if they go to the website, they can download 3 free chapters of my book, so they can get that and get started on their learning today.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes as well. So thank you everybody for listening today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.